Hi, this is Paul. After I watched the Luke stream where they were talking about David Bentley Hart and the Trinity and Christology, I got into the office and Algo served up to me this thing from Glenn Scrivener, who's looking for the receipts.
You know, I used to love all that new atheist stuff. But...
Me too. But a lot of those guys fell apart. And all those guys get real persnickety. They don't seem very enlightened. They don't seem like they're at peace, which is interesting. If you really do believe that, it definitely will help you.
I haven't got there, but I have started going to church every now and again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy it?
I love it.
Yeah. I do too. It's a bunch of people that are going to try to make their lives better. They're trying to be a better person. And they're trying to, I mean, for me at least, the place that I go to, they read and analyze passages in the Bible. I'm really interested in what these people were trying to say, because I don't think it's nothing.
Hi, I'm Glenn from Spain.
All right, so you get the background music, and which I personally don't like. So then, of course, I had to go and dig up the regular video, which I'm not going to play because all the YouTube stuff. But and I'm not that far into it. I'm only a half hour into it. And they basically start talking where you pretty much expect them to talk. They're talking about civil liberties in the UK, and they're talking about sort of the lack of civil liberties in UK. And Joe Rogan begins by basically saying, "You still live there? Why haven't you come to America? Where our civil liberties are protected, et cetera, et cetera." And then Joe Rogan is probably going to blow up a little account that as these kind of videos. So this is the video that Joe Rogan really enjoyed. Well, this is the longer YouTube version of it.
We're here at No Kings San Francisco because we believe in no kings but Christ and human rights and liberation for everyone, including the unborn. Let's see if they agree. Thoughts on human rights?
I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear you.
Do you support human rights?
Yes, of course.
For everybody?
Of course.
Gotcha. Even people in the womb?
Well, it all depends on if they're actually a baby or not.
Gotcha. Science says they are.
Well, it depends on what science you're talking about.
96% of all biologists, according to the NIH, believe in human rights.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, for everybody?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Even the unborn?
I guess.
Cool. So you guys are against abortion then?
No, I'm pro-choice.
Really?
Yeah.
So the unborn don't get rights?
Well, I wouldn't say that the unborn are real people. They're just not born yet.
Gotcha. Well, what makes someone a real person?
I'm not sure.
Hey guys, thoughts on human rights?
Human rights seem like a good idea.
Yeah, I think so too. For everybody?
Definitely.
Yeah, including the unborn?
Yeah.
A hard question?
That's an interesting question, isn't it?
So, yes? No? Babies get rights?
I think, like all other rights, they need to be balanced.
Really? With what?
What rights do you have?
Well, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I think, are the primary ones, with life being the
In
first.
this current environment?
Sorry?
Do all people have that right?
They should, yeah.
Name some that don't.
The unborn.
How about anyone else?
Yeah, anybody whose life is taken unjustly. You disagree?
I think an unborn life is a complicated life.
Yeah, well, aren't all human lives complicated?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And don't we all deserve rights?
We all deserve to live in a context which includes rights for ourselves and rights for others.
Complicated answer to a simple question, but thank you guys.
So Joe Rogan was taken by that. And it's just fascinating continuing to watch the evolution of this conversation. Now, yesterday I posted a video, and as my usual video process goes, I actually there was a video I made before it on the Anglican thing, which I didn't even like enough to throw into I didn't even finish it. It was just like I just wasn't feeling it so much yesterday afternoon, and that makes for videos that are just sort of stumbling and then I don't know if I should. But at the end of it, I thought, what am I going to name this video? And and then came up with World War II and the Forge of America's Imperial Four Freedoms Religion. And I thought, yeah, there's something about, I mean, we're talking about religion and these membranes between a lot of these categories are breaking down right now. And I'm continuing to make my way through Alex Ryrie's book, The Age of Hitler and How We Can Survive It. And that brought me to the World War question. The Western Allies would end up adopting a subtly different objective. Rather than the Great War for Christian civilization, this new struggle quickly came to be known as the World War, with the original Great War now redesignated as the first of that series. World War did not necessarily mean a war fought over the planet. Indeed, until the end of 1941, it was very much a European war, virtually unconnected with the ongoing butchery in China. It was much less a global conflict than 1914 to 1918 had been. It was a war for the world, a war fought in the name of universal principles against the aggressor that wanted to overthrow them. These principles, as FDR put in his Four Freedom speech in 1941, freedom of speech and worship, freedom from want and fear. America sought these freedoms. He insisted not only in itself, but everywhere in the world. Besides that stirring universal vision, Eliot's new Christian culture looked particularist, unambitious, and downright patriarchal. It was Roosevelt's America which popularized the ingenious new label for what the Allies were defending, not Christian civilization, but Judeo-Christian civilization. So, of course, I decide, well, I should dig up that speech, and that speech is here in the National Archive. And I'll put the link below to it. It's an interesting speech, and one of the things that strikes me right away is just how historically minded it is. It's a political speech. Now, if you want to do a little bit of background, 1941, this is January 1941. So Hitler has already defeated France. Hang on. All right, 3 hours later, France is defeated. Britain stands alone. The Japanese continue to be upset by America increasingly refusing to sell the Japanese war materials for their war in China. And the isolationism in the United States before Pearl Harbor is like an 80% position. Like 80% of Americans do not want to get into either war going on. They want to stay out of it. Now, of course, Pearl Harbor will change that, but that will be in December of 1941. And this is January of 1941. And Roosevelt desperately wants to help the British not fall. And so he wants to get Lend-Lease through. And so he has this major speech, and there's a video with him. Not that video. Not that. Where is it? This is an audio recording of the speech, and there's the most played. I'm sure that's the Four Freedoms. And then there's also the text of the transcript of the speech. And the transcript it's quite compared to the speeches we hear today, maybe we can play a little bit of it. There's another one that not that one. Here, let's play a little bit more of it here. Here we go.
Can produce and which we need. Let us say to the democracy, we Americans are vitally concerned in your defense of freedom. We are putting forth our energy, our resources, and our organizing power to give you the strength to regain and maintain a free world. We shall send you in ever-increasing numbers, ships, planes, tanks, guns. That is our purpose and our pledge.
So Americans don't want to get into the war, but as was the case with the First World War, I mean, the First World War, they were selling both sides weapons at the beginning of the war, and eventually they swing over to the French and British side. And again, they're going to sell weapons to try to keep the English from dropping out of the war.
We will not be intimidated by the threats of dictators that they will regard as a breach of international law or as an act of war, our aid to the democracies which dare to resist their aggression. Such aid.
Now, it's helpful to remember that at this point in 1941, the papacy is deeply allied with Mussolini yet. And Mussolini has desires to start his own colony in North Africa. So Italy and Germany are late to the colonial game because Germany loses the Great War. Germany loses the little bits of colonies that it had around the world in terms of Versailles. Bismarck was never really that excited about developing foreign colonies, not like the British and the French, and then the Italians wanted to get into the game.
Such aid is not an act of war, even if a dictator should unilaterally proclaim it so to be.
Now, what's interesting here is that if you listen to Joe Rogan, so Joe Rogan and Konstantin Kisin, they're basically complaining about what they see as tyrannical policies in the British, how the government is limiting their freedoms. And they basically see America as the place where these freedoms exist. And this is very much in line with Roosevelt.
And when the dictators, if the dictators are ready to make war upon us, they will not wait for an act of war on our part. They did not wait for Norway or Belgium or the Netherlands to commit an act of war. A new one-way international law, which lacks mutuality in its observance, and therefore becomes an instrument of oppression. The happiness of future generations of Americans may well depend on how effective and how immediate we can make our aid felt. No one can tell the exact character of the emergency situations that we may be called upon to meet. The nation's hands must not be tied when the nation's life is in danger. Yes, and we must prepare, all of us prepare, to make the sacrifices that the emergency, almost as serious as war itself, demands. Whatever stands in the way of speed and efficiency in defense preparations of any kind must give way to the national need. A free nation has the right to expect full cooperation from all groups. A free nation has the right to look to the leaders of business, of labor, and of agriculture to take the lead in stimulating effort, not among other groups, but within their own groups. The best way of dealing with the few slackers or troublemakers in our midst is first to shame them by patriotic example. And if that fails, to use the sovereignty of government to save government.
Now, Roosevelt is not above lying to the press. And when I was reading Ian Toll's third volume in a specific trilogy, has a whole chapter on Roosevelt and the press. And by the end of his administration, Roosevelt couldn't stand the press. And it was very interesting. There are parallels between Roosevelt and Trump, especially when we get into Molly Worthen's book, Charisma. There are definite parallels in terms of Roosevelt is changing the country quickly in order to meet what he sees as this existential threat for the United States.
As men do not live by bread alone, they do not fight by armaments alone.
That's quite a twist on Jesus' words to Satan.
Those who man our defenses and those behind them who build our defenses must have the stamina and the courage which come from unshakable belief in the manner of life which they are defending. The mighty action that we are calling for cannot be based on a disregard of all the things worth fighting for. The nation takes great satisfaction and much strength from the things which have been done to make its people conscious of their individual state in the preservation of democratic life in America. Those things have toughened the fiber of our people, have renewed their faith, strengthened their devotion to the institutions we make ready to protect. Certainly, this is no time for any of us to stop thinking about the social and economic problems which are the root cause of the social revolution which is today a supreme factor in the world. For there is nothing mysterious about the foundations of a healthy and strong democracy. The basic things expected by our people of their political and economic systems are simple. They are equality of opportunity for youth and for others, job for those who can work, security for those who need it, the ending of special privilege for the few, the preservation of civil liberties for all, the enjoyment.
See, and I don't think, again, part of what's interesting about the current culture war is both sides are kind of yelling at the other about the loss of these things, which means that the things themselves continue to be valued.
The enjoyment of the fruits of scientific progress in a wider and constantly rising standard of living. These are the simple, the basic things that must never be lost sight of in the turmoil and unbelievable complexity of our modern world. The inner and abiding strength of our economic and political systems is dependent upon the degree to which they fulfill these expectations. Many subjects connected with our social economy call for immediate improvement. As example, we should bring more citizens under the coverage of old age pensions and unemployment insurance. We should widen the opportunity for adequate medical care. We should plan a better system by which persons deserving or needing gainful employment may obtain it. I have called for personal sacrifice, and I am assured of the willingness of almost all Americans to respond to that call. A part of the sacrifice means the payment of more money in taxes. In my budget message, I will recommend that a greater portion of this great defense program be paid for from taxation than we are paying for today. No person should try or be allowed to get rich out of the program. And the principle of tax payments, in accordance with ability to pay, should be constantly before our eyes to guide our legislation. If the Congress maintains these principles, the voters, putting patriotism ahead of pocketbooks, will give you their applause. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second,
Okay, notice universal. Now, of course, at this point, the United States is not what it will become by the end of the Second World War. But this is, you know, and obviously the future ally of the United States, the Soviet Union, will not see it that way.
is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world.
So there you have these two from the Bill of Rights, and then freedom from want, which is basically framed as an economic thing, and then freedom from fear, which is framed as the end of nations aggressively trying to take over their neighbors, sort of this lion posture. And so this is seen as the beginning of this new universal posture with respect to how the world should be. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, when you look at basically what happens with Nazism is that the opposition to Nazism is these freedoms. And what was interesting about the papal states and the posture of the papacy, for example, was that the papacy was in favor of religious freedom in countries that were not Catholic, but in countries that were Catholic, they were in favor of suppressing competing religious groups, Protestant groups, and others. You basically will see similar things with Islamic countries today, that they will, in countries that they own, they will suppress other religions. Countries that they don't, if you persecute Muslims, and then you get this whole business with nationalism of, especially in Europe, where you have Germans that if you listen to the rest of this history with sort of the beginning stages leading up before World War II, part of Germany's justification for taking over Austria and part of what was then Czechoslovakia was always, well, our people are there and we are trying to defend our people. Putin is doing the same thing. Or our people are in Ukraine and we're trying to protect our people. Our people are in the Baltic states, and so we want to protect our people. And so this is something that was often used. So part of what's happening in the First World War to the old Ottoman Empire is it's basically breaking up. And Tsarist Russia would really love to get their hands on Constantinople again, because for them, Constantinople is like reclaiming Gondor, because Moscow is the third Rome, Constantinople is the second Rome. You have Orthodox Christianity, and what you find in the Ottoman Empire is actually a multi-ethnic state, that you have Christians and Jews and Muslims of various sorts all under the imperial reign. Now, of course, part of what happens as the Ottoman Empire breaks up is you have an ethnic and religious resorting. And of course, one of the groups that has the worst treatment in that are the Armenians. Along the way, the Armenians are subject to casual violence, mass rape, and sexual assault in lands notorious for robbers and bandits. According to Western observers, this humiliating maltreatment was part of the deliberate Turkish policy by which military leaders in charge of the refugees would deliberately notify local tribes of an imminent arrival of thousands of unprotected women and girls. Rape was always part of warfare, a predictable consequence of removing social constraints, but it had a special role in a society founded on principles of personal and family honor. Apart from gaining sexual advantage, perpetrators were also in effect destroying both those women and their families, and by implication, shaming their religion and their tribe. And so with the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, you've just got all of these atrocities going on, and it's it just continues. So there's no audiobook of Alex Ryrie's book out yet, but there is an audiobook of Molly Worthen's. And so I'm tending to listen to Molly's book while if I can catch a little bit of, part of the reason it's so difficult to read is just getting time where my eyes aren't busy with whatever it is I need to be taking care of. And audiobooks sort of fill in that gap. So I can drive and listen to audiobooks. Then if I get a moment to read, then I can read some of these other books that don't have audiobooks. Molly Worthen's book is really interesting in terms of the point she makes about charisma. And her, one of the people that she spends a fair amount of time on is George Washington. And of course, Washington isn't a religious leader, he's a political leader, but she's covering lots of different people along the way here. I can't get any time today to do anything. All right, this is from Worthen. Charisma is the relationship between leaders and followers, between individuals and unseen power, that makes that project of understanding possible. This is the broadest definition of the word, a starting point, because even the basic outlines of charisma are hard to make out. When I began this research, I was daunted by the prospect of trying to understand the appeal of leaders who lived centuries ago, in contexts so different from our own. How could I possibly reconstruct what they were like as public speakers, or what passed between them and their followers? How could the relatively small amount of evidence available, old sermons, church records, diary entries, later on press clippings, faded advertisements, old lithograph, provide a sense of what leaders were really like and what their followers experienced? Even if I could find out, could I overcome my 21st century assumptions to enter their world and explain something as ineffable as charisma? Eventually, however, I realized something. Most of us are no less baffled by political or religious movements close at hand in our own culture. This is why it's important to investigate the deep history of charisma. This peculiar way that our species has found to attach ourselves to authority, to organize the confusions and disappointments of life into a story that means something. If we happen to stand on the outside of the movement looking in, no quality of video footage, no deluge of social media data, probably not even a personal encounter with a charismatic leader at a rally or revival will help us truly get it. The thought is both depressing and liberating, and it removes any excuse to dodge the past. She goes into the definition of charisma, talks about Montanists, the Montanists. The Montanists challenged the authority of bishops and priests by claiming that God still spoke directly through unexpected prophets, just as he had in ancient Israel. But the church could not stop Montanism from spreading through Western Asia and North Africa, where it survived for centuries. From the beginning, then, charisma was a contentious invitation to get some great and ungovernable power work through you, whether you were a leader or a follower. The meaning of the word has evolved since then, but the core remains the same. Christians still use the word charisma in the way that Paul did, but it also migrated into everyday non-theological speech. In secular context, we use it to mean the irresistible and sometimes generous allure that gives a leader the power to move a multitude. The more precisely, the word describes an ongoing exchange between leader and crowd, mutually created and sustained. Followers accept their leader, the feeling of status and strength. He may offer a bullhorn, a bribe, or a sense of fellowship and recognition. The most important thing, however, is that he draws back the veil on an alternative world in which followers find that they have secret knowledge, supernatural promise, and special status as heroes. And Roosevelt's speech has all of that. Now, I checked a little bit further ahead in the book, and she is going to talk about Roosevelt. Roosevelt is a vitally important, I mean, he was president. He won 4 terms in office. He didn't live through his last term, obviously, but there hasn't been a president with that much longevity in office, or in many ways power, that we've seen in the American presidency. Again, as I mentioned before, she also treats George Washington as an interesting sort of inversion of charisma. Washington had a tremendous amount of charisma, but it wasn't the kind of thing that we usually focus on, as it was deep respect. And a lot of that deep respect was because how he didn't assert himself. And people trusted him with themselves because he wasn't aggressive with them. And so I think FDR is a great example of what she's talking about in terms of charisma, because in many ways, what FDR unleashes is this vision. And again, it's a universal vision. It's a worldwide vision of the 4 freedoms. And this, in many ways, will sort of energize and captivate. This will become part of America's religious consciousness. Now, if you're all the way to here...
I miss them.
Yeah, me too. Which ones do you miss?
I more so miss the general consensus that, like, women should have rights to their bodies, and we shouldn't deport people, and we should just treat others with, like, kindness and respect. So.
Me too, yeah. Especially babies, I think.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
It'd be great if we had any standards at all right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, but tragically, we're killing 3,000 babies every single day in America through abortion. You against that?
I'm pro-abortion. Actually, I think that a woman has the right to choose. So.
Well, I thought we agreed we shouldn't kill babies.
I don't think that abortion is killing babies. I think that, it just depends on where you draw the line in the sand. So.
Gotcha. Where do you draw it? Where does life have value?
I think we should probably go. Freedom means choice. Freedom means choice, you guys. Yeah. Freedom means choice.
Choice to do what?
It's not for you.
I love to interview you, brother.
Freedom means I said what I needed to say. Goodbye.
Does that include the choice to commit murder?
Freedom means choice. We're now theocracy. Do you get that? We're now theocracy.
You guys are.
We're not a theocracy. You get that? We're not a theocracy. And again, this is all these ghosts that remain from previous centuries. September 20, 1870, marked a historical turning point, both for the Roman Catholic Church and for Italy, and one could say that the whole Western world as well. On that date, the Middle Ages was finally laid to rest. Europe's last theocratic government was ended with a model of government based on a mixture of church law and civil law, of discrimination against those practicing minority religions, of a church monopoly over education and social services, and the use of police powers to enforce religious observance. In short, all this proved traumatic for the Holy See. But from our vantage point today, it was, of course, inevitable and ultimately liberating for the church itself. The Pope never did abandon Rome, yet in the last years of the 19th century saw little reduction in the tension between church and state. The periodic flare-ups producing new rounds of denunciations, charges, and fears on both parties. Italy remained perilously weak, its legitimacy undercut by Pope and Church. Leo XIII's earlier hope of making peace with the Italian state waned, and ecclesiastical proponents of reconciliation were silenced. The Pope was well aware of the need for a more positive program to adapt the church to the times and win greater popular support. Towards this end, May 1891, he released the historic encyclical Rerum Novarum, castigating the excesses of capitalism while warning of the evils of socialism. By speaking out forcefully in favor of workers' rights, the Pope helped to change the church's image as the handmaiden of the elites. To mark this new initiative, an encyclical was followed by an endless stream of working-class pilgrims to the Vatican. And so the Pope sort of manages to kind of turn the other way to sort of, well, let's get back on the side of the workers. By the time the First World War was over, well, let's see, I want to get to the popular party here. Yeah, here it is. By the time the First World War was over, it was clear to virtually everyone in the Vatican that the growing socialist movement presented a much greater threat than any posed by moderate forces that controlled the Italian government. And so in 1919, Benedict XV agreed to the creation of a Catholic political party, a move that his predecessors had long resisted. The Italian Popular Party was formed, led by a priest, Luigi Sturzo, but not directly depending on the Vatican or the church hierarchy. With the approach of the first elections in which the new party would appear in November of that year, the Pope finally listened the non-expedit. So Catholics were told by the papacy in Italy not to vote. You ought not to vote, because that just encourages the legitimacy of the government. Now, at that point, they're told, you may vote, which had for so many decades prohibited Catholics from voting or serving in Parliament. In fact, the Catholic Party did very well, receiving 21% of the vote, coming in second only to the Socialist Party, which received 32%. For the Liberals, who had controlled the Italian government for decades, the only way to form a cabinet that excluded the Socialists was by relying on the deputies of the Popular Party. This they did. Yet the new government faced even more militant trade unions and peasant leagues to the left, and on its right, the spread of fascist violence. Led by Benito Mussolini, the fascists won the favor of the police and the military, who turned a blind eye to the attacks mounted by their squads of thugs. Amidst all the violence, the state itself began to totter. Now, as I read in a previous video, reading The Pope and Mussolini, that book, the Pope finally, in his negotiations with Mussolini, killed the Popular Party. The party that they had raised earlier on at the end of the night, at the end of the First World War, they killed that party to basically give power to Mussolini, because Mussolini promised priests back in schools, more control, more censorship of newspapers, and all of this. And what you can see is, and again, during the Second World War, the papacy was very hesitant about the Americans because, you know, the FDR, he's Protestant, he has Jews in his cabinet, shouldn't be trusted. And so it's not until, of course, the 1960s when suddenly you would see the Catholic Church begin to get behind these freedoms. And these freedoms eventually become basically religious dogma. Because, you know, I'm pointing out Catholics here, but you can point to many Protestant cities in the United States or in Europe that also restricted religious liberty, for example. So I don't see these things ending in America anytime soon. Both sides want them. And for that reason, this whole post-liberal thing, I'm skeptical. Americans want their freedoms, and they want the kind of church, and go back to Sam Tiedemann's videos about moralistic therapeutic deism. This is the style of religion that is basically went out into the world, but it's fairly new. And so in many respects, you have to look at the charisma of this man and how it came, and how now it's pretty much assumed that this is what should happen. And then when you get to Islam, it's going to be interesting because, of course, can Islam adapt to this? And Tom Holland says, that's a very open question, because for them to adapt to this, they have to give up something. Now, the Catholics, people keep talking about the Reformation with respect to Islam. The period of time they should probably look at is, can Islam give up what the Vatican gave up in the 19th and early 20th century in order to embrace the four freedoms? Leave a comment.